This is the Road Home podcast with author and teacher Ethan Nichtern. Through the lens of mindfulness and engaged Buddhism, Ethan and guests explore culture, art, politics, psychology, and spiritual practice with an eye toward both personal and collective transformation. For more information, visit www.ethannichtern.com.
So hi everybody, this is Ethan Nichtern, and this is the transition episode of the relaunched Road Home podcast. We're sponsored by Dharma Moon, and with many thanks for several years of being hosted on the Be Here Now network. So first, just wanted to let you know about a few upcoming online events that I'm doing via the dharmamoon.com platform that would be great for you to join. The first is on December 19th, Tuesday, 2023. I'll be co-hosting talk and gathering with my dear friend and mentor Sharon Salzberg called Finding Stability in an Unstable World. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern. It's a free event, should be great. We'll come together, practice a little, hear from Sharon some tools for working with our hearts and minds in a current state of chaos, and then also a chance to hear more about the 2024 year-long Buddhist studies that I head the faculty for, which is also via the dharmamoon.com platform. And then if you're looking for a way to set intention for the year 2024, I'm hosting an online gathering in the afternoon, Eastern Time afternoon of December 31st for setting an intention and contemplating one's intention going into the new year. That's also on dharmamoon.com, and you can find out information there. It's 3 p.m. To 4 p.m. on the afternoon of the 31st. So before you go out and rage, or in my case, probably stay home and chill or hang with a friend or two. I don't know if there's a lot of ragers listening to the Road Home podcast, but whatever your New Year's Eve vibe is, it's a great tradition to come together online and practice together and in a structured way, contemplate our intentions for the new year. So dharmamoon.com for more information about that. The year-long Buddhist Studies program is starting again in late January on Tuesday evenings live, but everything's recorded. So check those things out. And obviously, if you want further updates from me, you can go to ethannichtern.com, see the books I've written, and get on the email list if you want regular but not super frequent updates. Okay, so thinking about relaunching the podcast, which I took a 9-month break from just because life was full and busy, and it's a lot of work to do multiple things. I'm just thinking about the state of the world and really the state of dialogue and discourse in the world right now. Obviously, I think been having so many conversations where I'm just trying to listen to people, reflect back to them one-on-one in dialogue. If they ask for my opinion, I can give it as long as I'm clear that it's my subjective experience of the situation, and obviously, people have been talking about this for a long time. But I think, especially with the crisis and massacres in the Middle East right now, on top of all that violence and horror and atrocity, I think we're also seeing those of us who are trying to, through our filtered screens and our social connections and our media and social media, we are experiencing kind of a deeper inability to dialogue, or a bigger rift in dialogue than I can ever remember. And it's especially interesting because a lot of times this, deeper rift in dialogue, unlike other situations in American politics, for example, where there's really very different views of the world at play, these rifts in dialogue often happen amongst people who otherwise kind of share worldviews, or, politically might share policy views, or might share spiritual practices even. And so part of my personal hesitancy or resistance to engaging in dialogue about the horrors of the world in public forums has been just based on, dealing more with private life. Went through a major heartbreak this summer. I'm sure so many of us are heartbroken right now. So I feel you. But mostly it's been just really, not really feeling super well equipped always to have a sense of the dynamics at play, the historical dynamics, the intergenerational traumas, the different aspects of identity, colonialism, privilege, etc. That's been one part of it, but the other part is just seeing really the inadequacy of especially social media discourse to actually help us get back into our mindful and emotional bodies, and really just pushing us into a really hot take, binary style, linguistics driven, conceptual only way of experiencing the world and experiencing our sense of right and wrong in the world. And so in listening to people a lot, what's been interesting is to see this really interesting Buddhist truth, which is the idea that our perceptual, meaning our sensory and our emotional experience, actually happens underneath, or you could say before, our conceptual framework, our ideas or ideology comes in to kind of explain to ourselves and then to others what's going on in the world. And the conceptual framework can be very helpful if it's attuned to our perceptual and emotional experience. But what usually happens when we're not really well attuned or not being mindful, which is a lot of the time in my own experience, speaking for myself, is that the conceptual framework actually serves as a way to bypass or suppress or forget about our perceptual and emotional selves. And the thing that's so tragic about this is when we actually tune in to our senses, our feelings first, we are tuning in to our humanity, and we are tuning into our interconnectedness, our actually lived on the ground interconnectedness with other humans, with the earth, with other sentient beings. And it's that tuning in process that I've come to feel, especially social media, just sort of watching the scroll and experiencing my own body and mind whenever I do, in rare instances, go on just to scroll, on Instagram or Threads. I don't do TikTok, but whenever I just scroll, it feels like social media is pushing us, and I would argue intentionally that it's the algorithmic and advertising based model of the structure to it's pushing us to throw up quick conceptual frames to describe our view of the pain and suffering of the world, and to ignore our emotional body, right? And to ignore the effects of our emotional body on, the hundreds of other, maybe even thousands of other people we may contact in their emotional bodies if we express ourselves on social media. And it feels kind of akin the way that we are pushed to talk to each other on social media at this point. And, I think in the past, I've tried my best to have emotionally attuned dialogue with people when they comment on something I post. But it's actually nearly impossible to do this because we're not actually experiencing each other. We're just experiencing each other's avatars. And it pushes us towards conceptual binaries. And I've been noticing a lot of this in social media spaces, which I haven't been noticing when I'm just listening to people's lived experience or people who know a lot more about the complex history of, for example, Gaza and Palestine and Israel. When I'm listening to people, I get this sense of complexity and care for humanity and the intellect actually serving to inform us of something. But on social media, it feels like the intellect and the linguistic structures really push us into binaries. And the problem with binaries is whenever the conceptual brain in a binary way of thinking comes across something that doesn't completely attune to its conceptualization, it categorizes what it came across as like the worst possible deviation from that, right? So, to give an example, if somebody posts, let's say, Free Palestine, right, and a person's conceptualization is really in support of the Israeli people without attunement to the emotional body of oneself and the person who just said Free Palestine, then that person might say that's anti-Semitic. Whereas from a non-binary way of thinking, there's absolutely nothing about saying I want people to be free that is contrary to the humanity or embodiment of or rights of another group of people, right? That binary actually is not what the person who said Free Palestine is saying. Conversely, when somebody says, free the hostages, that is not necessarily a colonial mindset, right? That's not necessarily supporting, it's not a genocidal mindset. When I emotionally attune with people, I haven't talked to anybody who sounds anti-Semitic or who supports genocide, right? But if you go on social media and we don't attune to our bodies, it sounds like there are a lot of people who hate another group of people and are willing to just give up on them. This is the same way I've been thinking about this a lot. Since I now drive a lot, I own a car for the first time in my life. I know that's for people who are not, I've always traveled a lot, but for people who are not from New York, that sounds like funny. New York City based joke that a person could be in their early mid 40s and have a car for the first time ever. But driving a lot, it is akin to the way that when we get frustrated, we just flip off the other person and drive away or honk our horn way too loudly, right? And the reason we do that is we're not attuned to our emotional body. We're not attuned to the other person. We're not mindful and perceptual. So we just go into the kind of binary thought about what is the best way to put this person out of my life and out of my awareness. And the reason we can do that is to say, I'm just going to keep scrolling, right? On the road or the highway, you just drive off. Now, that person might actually be your friend. You might actually have a lot in common with that person, right? We might actually be able to connect a little bit more if we didn't flip them off. Here's the thing about social media that I think is a little bit more sinister than the highway example. It's not a public space. I know we want to believe that this is the way we gather as humans, right? And it is a gathering place, and it's good to go on. I think social media is great, actually, specifically when we are connecting with people, letting them know about events, which could be personal events, which could be social events, or things happening in our life, or opportunities to help the world that exist off of social media, that actually get us off of the app. Then I think social media is really great. But if we really, this is what I've been thinking about. It's what the algorithm does is it actually promotes these binaries. If it sees comments that are inflammatory, it actually promotes those so more people see them. And then more people think, well, look at these awful people who said this thing that clearly means they disagree with all these other things that a moral person would support. And then we just get pissed and angry and, to use the modern term, dysregulated. Well, here's the thing that's sinister. And I don't mean sinister in the sense of malicious necessarily, but I do mean sinister in terms of the impact on us. So the thing that's sinister is that we get dysregulated, we get angry at each other, we feel like other people are really immoral or just really blind. And in that dysregulated state, then we scroll, and the algorithm is hoping, and the profit model of social media is hoping that in our dysregulated state, we scroll and click an ad, or at least view an ad and get absorbed in that or get affected by that. So again, it's not really public, heartfelt, mindful, grounded dialogue that's happening on social media. So, I've been spending a lot of time offline, really just trying to listen to myself, dialoguing with friends, dialoguing with students, dialoguing with other folks. And, some of that is just because I don't really know what else to do. Some of that is because I felt like being offline, dealing with experiences and heartbreak in my personal life. Don't worry, I'm have all the support that I need. Great friends, great practices, great psychological and spiritual tools, great therapists, all of it. Great teachers. So, but also just in terms of the state of the world, just not really feeling like I have an adequate conceptual understanding. And also, when I'm working with Dharma students, I don't feel in that specific relationship. It's my role to say, well, here's my view of the situation, unless asked for, in which case I think it is healthy to kind of mix up our views of how our spiritual practice informs our political and social sense of the world. I think teachers, Dharma teachers, therapists should completely be willing to share their view of morality when it feels appropriate. But listening to a lot of people, what you notice is people don't always have the same conceptual framework, right? Some people I've noticed in terms of Israel and Palestine and Gaza and Hamas and Netanyahu's, some people, it brings up the framework. If they have Jewish heritage, it could bring up the framework of intergenerational trauma. That's not something I personally have, even though I am half Jewish and have a Jewish last name. I've never really connected to Judaism. I've been in a church, way, 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 way more times than I've been in a synagogue in my life. And, but really hearing and respecting, okay, that's what this brings up for some people. Some people, it brings up colonialism and more powerful entities bombing and colonizing people of color, right? And that's the framework that it brings up, and all of the pain of the global history around that. For me, it brought up the social violent catastrophe that kind of really dawned my adult political consciousness, which was coming back to New York 3 days before 9/11 after living at a meditation center in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont for 7 months, and just having this, this is so awful, this awful terrorist attack that then was met by a flailing right-wing government who clearly manipulated people's emotional bodies to have an atrocious response, and I know there's those of you who are actual historians of the Middle East will say there's some similarities, but that's inadequate. But that's what it brought up for me, right? There's nothing to actually compare one event to, in a sense, because each event is unique. So I was holding that, right? But when you really listen to where people are coming from and what they're feeling when we become mindful, it's the same emotions again and again and again in this situation. It's grief, anger, fear. That's what I'm hearing again and again. And in my not at all to compare experiences from different arenas of life, but feeling a lot of grief in my personal life this fall, I can really hold that space of an inconsolable and unshielded heart right now, and also can hold the experience of joy and humor, right, which people are having. So grief, fear, anger. Now then, when you get people to sort of move into the conceptual framework of now describe the world and what you see of the world, that's where it starts to deviate, and I know how I feel there. I'm a Buddhist. I'm nonviolent. I'm also very interested in privilege and power dynamics and, the history of all these different overlapping histories that are at play here. When I did go on social media, somebody posted a James Baldwin quote from 1980 where he's actually assessing the Republican candidates for President of the United States. This is from an article he wrote for The Nation, where he said, "The children are always ours, every single one of them, all over the globe, and I am beginning to suspect that whoever is incapable of recognizing this may be incapable of morality." Which is to say that if one's response to an atrocity is to somehow normalize the killing of children, or the killing of former children, in my mind, our morality has been corrupted by the defensiveness and aggression brought out by trauma, right? So obviously, as a Buddhist, ceasefire, what little I understand, the people who are still calling for a two-state solution seem to be the wisest. I feel like we do need to re-inhabit a little bit of naivete about nonviolence, and just say maybe return to the state of like, if you're grown men, Hamas, Benjamin Netanyahu, anybody really, and you're in a leadership position and you can't figure out conflict resolution without killing children, you don't deserve your leadership position. And but how to get there, nobody knows, right? I just know that for me, hashtags posted on social media and fights in comments that dysregulate everyone and make us feel like the entire rest of the world is a binary that either agrees with us completely or doesn't, is out to get us somehow. That sort of honking and flipping off people on the highway approach is not the kind of discourse that I can engage in. I'm much more interested in trying to start with the grief, the fear, the anger, the joy, the humor, all of the other emotions, and then share our conceptual ideas, right? And I am interested in social media, but I'm specifically interested in doing things on social media that get people off of social media, because it doesn't feel like the real world. So a podcast is not the real world either, but it has some advantages. We can listen to people for longer periods of time. We can hear people's voices. We can note what their tone of voice is. We can feel what's in our body as we listen to them. We can dialogue a little bit more. And I really do like dialoguing with many of my friends and wiser people than I, and experts, and also, when it makes sense to just share my experience or share some of my understanding of the Buddhist and other psycho-spiritual teachings to sort of work with all of this chaos in the world and all this fear and pain and madness and also beauty in the world. And so I wanted to return to doing that more frequently than this podcast was on the Be Here Now platform. So my hope is to release at least one episode of the Road Home podcast every week going forward. And that will replace posting things that are political, other than maybe get out the vote movements as we move towards the 2024 election, which I have a feeling in my heart is going to be pretty bonkers. And we need to strap in for 2024. And by strap in, I mean take our seats and start with our mindful, perceptual, feeling bodies, and notice when we're getting too conceptual, too binary. So I want to talk more, basically, and listen more to wise people. And I like doing the podcast. And I don't like social media anymore. I'm going to use it sparingly. And I think that's all I wanted to say for this transition episode. So please, thanks so much for listening. Stay tuned for future episodes with guests and future episodes where I tackle some Buddhist thought in the modern world. And also going to be releasing some guided meditations on the dharmamoon.com platform in the coming months. Have a new book on struggling with confidence coming out in June. So lots going on to share. And so if you do want to join the events on the dharmamoon.com platform, December 19th, with Sharon Salzberg, that's a free event. December 31st, a New Year's Eve in the afternoon, Eastern time, intention setting, gathering, That's a by donation event, year-long Buddhist studies program starting in late January. You can go to dharmamoon.com. Otherwise, just wanted to say thank you so much, and wanted to say thank you to Jen Liu for helping with podcast production going forward, and my friend and amazing musician Kodomo for the intro and outro music to the podcast. So that's it for The Road Home. This is Ethan Nichtern. We'll see you pretty soon next time.
This has been The Road Home Podcast with Ethan Nichtern. For more info, visit ethannichtern.com and dharmamoon.com.